name of Jesus is the pathway to blessing. We are in a fantastic mini-series. As of last week, we started part 1. It's called The Covenants of God. Now you can put it up. There it is. Part 2. This is an awesome series. So important that we understand some things. How many of you are glad we can understand some things? 2 of you. Okay, well, I'm praying for the rest of you this morning. A very quick review. This is kind of typical of teaching. The very first thing you want to do in part 1 is to lay out some definition. What are we talking about? Amen? What are we talking about when we talk about covenants of God? How many of you used the word covenant in the last 7 days? Don't put your hand up. So in part 1, we began to define this term covenant. We also were beginning to define the importance and the scope of it. And eventually we're going to talk about the mutual benefits that are derived from something called covenant. Say, covenant is a good thing. Yeah. Anybody married here? You are in a covenant. Let's talk about that. The definition, we're going to review just a little bit, and then we're going to hit the ground running. The definition, last week we talked about this term, covenant, is used to describe various transactions between God and man, but it's not just that. It also can be between man and man. Covenant. There's 2 different types, 2 different ways to enter into covenant. And it's rendered, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, this is what you'd see. Covenant is a treaty. Covenant can be called an alliance. A pledge of agreement. That's cool. Promise. Think of these words. Oath. And contract. All of these descriptions describe covenant. Now, it's vital to understand God's viewpoint. Why? Because He's the inventor. He came up with covenant, so we want to make sure we have His mindset. God has taught us all things pertaining to covenant that we need to know and understand. When people enter into a compact, there's a new term, we'll say an agreement. It's called covenant, and it can involve many people. A treaty, if you think about it, can be between nations, large groups of people. Or you can dial it all the way down to 2 individuals, party 1, party 2. 2 people. It can be dialed all the way down to just 2 individuals, covenant. So that's the scope. Each party binds themselves to fulfill certain conditions. Now, I don't have enough time to review all of this. You can go into the archives and look at part 1 from last week if you need more background, more definition. But each of the parties would bind themselves to fulfill certain conditions, and then there would be the results of entering into covenant with somebody. There would be benefits, mutual benefits to each party. When 2 entered into covenant, this would be a man and another fellow man. What they would do is they would invoke God, talking about ancient things that we see in the Scriptures. They would invoke God and say, God, you be a witness between us. You witness what we are going to declare to each other. We're going to enter into covenant. And those were called covenants of Jehovah, or a covenant of God. So they would make an oath and they would swear to fulfill all the obligations of the covenant as they would enter in. Can you see marriage as a type of covenant of God? That's exactly what takes place. We invoke God, we ask God, you come and be the witness. You witness these people exchanging their oaths or their vows together, their pledge of agreement. All right, so I don't have any more time to review. Sorry. So if you need more review, go into part 1 last week in the archives on the website. Now, We're going to segue into part 2 this morning. At the end of part 1 last week, someone brought to me 2 questions. Question 1 and question 2. And they were great questions. Not that the questions themselves were so great, but the reason that they're great is they're going to help us segue into part 2. How interesting is that? Timing is impeccable. So let me tell you what the 2 questions are. Question number 1. Of all the covenants in the Bible, and there are several, which one is referred to as the Old Covenant? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then question number 2 was powerful, because we talked about the Old Covenant ending. And so this was the question number 2. How did God legally get out of it? How did God legally end the covenant? What a great question. Because that's exactly where we needed to go this morning. How awesome. Good questions. So let's take question number 1 first. Last week we talked about many examples in the scriptures where we can see covenant, and we're going to look at several today. A covenant between God and the man Noah. There's one. Another, a covenant between God and the name of a man named Abram. Another covenant. Covenant between God and this 12-tribe glob of people called the Hebrews. Another covenant between God and the man David, King David. Several examples. So the question is, which one of these covenants is the old when it's done? Great question. And besides all of those, there are several more, and there's renewals and there's reconfirmation. And so we're going to look at some this morning, and when you look at these covenants, you're going to see something very interesting. Cool. I like interesting. Let's start with Genesis 17:19. The book of Genesis, very first book. And I want to just show you something that's very interesting. And God said, we'll find out who he's talking to. Sarah, thy wife, there's a clue, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. There's a clue. And I will establish my covenant with him for how long? Till next week. For his lifetime. What does it say? Everlasting. What does that mean? A long time. Everlasting. Eternal covenant. And with his seed after him. So I will reconfirm this covenant after he's long gone, with his children and his children's children forever. And so this is what I wanted you to see, that there are examples of covenants in the scriptures that are everlasting covenants. They're going to go on and on and on, like pastors. Okay. Another one. Let's look at Exodus 31:16. You're being so kind. Exodus 31:16. Check it out. Oh, the first covenant was with Abram, right? And that's just one reference. There's several references to that covenant. And we'll probably talk about that next week. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, Shabbat, to observe it throughout their generations for a, help me, perpetual covenant. Is that a covenant that's going to end? Trick question. Careful. In God's eyes, it's a perpetual covenant. In their generations. All right, let's look at another one. 2 Samuel 23. We have to give you this foundation so you see this very interesting aspect. 2 Samuel 23:5. This is kind of a muddy verse in the King James. Although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and sure. This is with the man David. making a covenant with David, saying that in his house there's going to be a kingly line on and on and on and on. All right. Another one, Numbers 25:13. I just want to give you some examples so you know I'm not making this up. Not that I would do that. I wouldn't lie in church. Numbers 25:13. Come on. And he shall have it in his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. This is the covenant with Phinehas. Again, we don't have time to go through the whole story, but he slew somebody who was setting a very bad example for the nation of Israel. And God said he rewarded him because he was zealous for me and made an atonement for the children of Israel. I'm going to establish my covenant. It's going to be a long covenant. Right? Now, I want to show you one covenant between God and Israel, and nothing is being said about it being everlasting. Key point. Getting to the root of question 1. Look at Exodus 19:5. Check out these words. Watch for the word everlasting, eternal, anything synonymous with that. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for the earth is mine forever and ever. No, it doesn't say that. Read the fine print. There's nothing that says eternal or everlasting. Exodus 23, turn just a few chapters to your right. Exodus 23, let's look at a few verses in this chapter. Bam! Good job. For my angel shall go before thee and bring thee in unto the rights. Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, not parasites, Canaanites, Hivites, Lovites, Jebusites. He's going to lead you, and I'm going to cut them off. What does that mean? Go ahead and keep reading. 24. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. Thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. Quite, as the King's English would say. Verse 25. Quite. And you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread. This is Old King James. We'll talk about this next week. And thy water. And check this out. Old Testament covenant. One of the benefits will be, I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Old covenant, Old Testament. How many of you think that would be really good? God's going to bless your water, he's going to bless your bread, and he's going to take sickness away from you. Not bad. All right. One more reference, another chapter, Exodus 24. I want to show you the old covenant, the one that was enacted on Mount Sinai. Exodus 24. This would be great reading on your own time, because we don't have enough time to go through all these verses. Verse 4, Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning. I like Moses. He's a morning guy. And builded an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 6. And Moses took half of the blood and put it into 2 basins. Half. 2. Do the math. And half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And then next verse 7, the other half, he took the book of the covenant and read it in the audience of the people. This is all of the covenant. This is what you are agreeing to do. And read in the audience of the people, and they said, what? Everything, all that the Lord has said we should do, we will do, and we will be obedient. Verse 8, this is the other half. So Moses took the other half, and he sprinkled it on the people, symbolically saying, behold the blood of the covenant which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words. You are in covenant with God. According to, and that's why you have to do the reading on your own, to see what God was requiring of them. But then God also said, this is what I will do for you. This is the old covenant. It's not an everlasting covenant. It was never referred to in the scriptures as an eternal covenant. In fact, God gave us a clue in them. He said, behold, the days are coming. I'm going to make a new covenant. And this is the one that he's talking about. This is not going to be perpetual. This is not going to be everlasting. This covenant was provisional. What does that mean? It means that it was for an interim period of time. It was temporary, we would say. And there were some unacceptable things about this covenant. Like what? I'm so glad you asked. For example, the mediator. How many of you know who the mediator was? We saw his name. Of the old covenant there at Mount Sinai. His name was Moses. How many of you know Moses wasn't perfect? That's a problem right there. We have a mediator who is human. He is fallible. He's not perfect. In fact, he made some grave mistakes. In fact, he was prohibited from going into the promised land. That's a little bit of a problem. And then the priesthood of this covenant. God established the priesthood. Moses' brother Aaron. How many of you know Aaron wasn't perfect? He made some mistakes. There were some imperfectness. And even down the priesthood through into the time of Jesus, they were the leaders. They were the teachers. They were the ones to enforce the covenant. But how many of you know that they were corrupt? Receiving bribes? The priests. They weren't perfect. Showing favoritism? Oh. And so God said, we're changing it. This covenant isn't going to last forever. I hate to use this word, but this will help us get the picture. God was saying, I am bringing forth a brand new type of religion. If that's the way that you want to look at it. He's saying the old religion, that's not good enough for me. Give me that old time. Yeah, never mind. Some of you remember. He's saying, I'm going to lay this out brand new. This is unacceptable. Imperfect mediator, imperfect priesthood. Yeah. Got to be changed. I'm going to appoint a new mediator. I'm going to appoint an entirely new priesthood. So we're going to talk about that. Let's go on to question 2. Don't look at your watch. Question number 2 was, how did God legally get out of a covenant? How could he? What a great question. What a great question. And here's the answer. You ready? Get ready. God does what he does because he is who he is. You're looking at me like, what? Could you repeat the question? God does what he does because he is who he is. We're going to see the truth of this statement. First of all, God has a legal right to do whatever he wants to with his creatures. Whatever pleases him, God can do. He has a legal right. He owns everything. He created everything. He pulls the strings. The thing about God is he is never unjust in everything that he does. He never wrongs his creatures. So, let's talk a little bit about God broke the covenant. How did he legally do that? If you will study this word, break, in the Hebrew there's 2 definite definitions. Definition 1 definitely means to transgress or to violate. If 2 people were in covenant and one decided, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. So they would break the covenant. Yeah, they would violate the terms, or you could say they would transgress the terms. That is one definition of this word break. Oh, but there's 2. Here's the second definition of this word, parar. It means to disannul. It means to destroy it, end it. It means that it no longer exists and it no longer is in force. So in the understanding of God breaking the covenant, he just said, that's it. The covenant ends. And he was totally legal in doing so. In fact, he had already warned us and them, I am going to make a new covenant. So I say when the old covenant stops, and I say when the new covenant begins, because I am God. How's that for a powerful answer? It's true. God does what he does, and he is who he is. He predicted this old covenant would be replaced by a new covenant. That's not provisional. And the interesting thing is that he decided to, in this new covenant, he's going to make it different. He actually is going to put part of his nature into all of those who enter into this covenant with him. What will that do? A new nature to comply with civil law, with criminal law, with judicial law. All of the ecclesiastical and ceremonial laws. Now they're going to have a heart to enter into all of that because of the divine nature that I put in them. They're going to enjoy it. It's going to be different. Now, oh, we have to do that again? Oh no, we get to do this. We get to do that. We are appreciative. We're thankful. So the old covenant was with the tribes of Israel. 12 tribes came out of Egypt. And that covenant established them as a nation. And God even said, I'm going to give you land. This is your land. This land is your land. And nobody is ever going to take it away from you because this is eternal, everlasting. I don't care what the road plan, is that what it was? That our President Bush was trying to help them? I don't care what the world thinks, who this land belongs to. Who says it's theirs? God. Who's going to change that? Nobody. God says, and you'll see this next week, we're going to talk about the benefits of the old covenant, and then we're going to talk about the benefits of the new covenant. And here's where we're going with this. If we have a covenant with God and we meet the terms and God's benefits are available to us, are we entitled to all those benefits? Yes or no? Good answer. So if we're not receiving the benefits, there is a problem. If his covenant says, I'm going to take all sickness away from you and you get sick, what is wrong with that picture? Why? If God says in this covenant, you're going to be blessed financially, prosperity, everything, you're going to be happy, and you're not. What's wrong with that picture? This is where we're going to go in part 3. What is the problem here? I'm in this covenant with God. Who can break that? And he says this and this and this. These are the benefits, and I'm not getting them. Is the problem up there? You think God's getting a little forgetful? A little rusty? A little tired? Oh, do you know how long I've been around? No, problem's not up there. If you got a financial need and God's going, oh, how are we going to ever meet that? And the lights of heaven just kind of dims. Are you kidding me? He's got planets. He owns everything on this planet. You think Bill and Linda Gates impress God with their wealth? Have you ever seen heaven? The description, the snapshots. are in the Scriptures. It's indescribable, the wealth, the affluence, the beauty. And God, if He wants something, He just goes, zzz. So your big financial problem is going to knock God off the throne and be like, oh, what's wrong? Where's the problem? Down here. So we're going to talk about this next week. But we have to lay out all of this foundation. When God talks about covenant, we need to have His mindset. We need to have His understanding. What does covenant mean? It's unbreakable. Unless He says, I'm going to break the covenant. Or if you break your part of the deal, you break the covenant, consequences. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So you have to come back. How many of you coming back next week?